Welcome to Gardening with William DeMille. This is our Thursday Q&A where I help you have the very best garden of your entire life. I'm super excited. It's April 6th and things are doing awesome in the garden right now. I was planting tons of onions today and they are coming up beautifully. I got 3 trays planted, so that means that I planted 600 plugs. So that's pretty great. We have more trays to go to get them all in, but I'm just spacing it out and enjoying the garden. We're not trying to attack it like an Olympic sport, or we would have got it all done today. In this Thursday night Q&A, we discuss gardening, farming, livestock, the Georgic tradition, soil health, and education. The purpose of this is to increase your health from the ground up. And I'm super excited to share with you some of the things that we are doing here to help the world be a better place and to help families feed themselves from their gardens. There are 9 ways that I help people to grow food, and it's super fun because we're focused on ecological agriculture. Eco-agriculture is great because we're focused on the kind of agriculture that uses the principles of ecology to grow food. We have our YouTube channel, our weekly Q&A, which is what this meeting is. We have our Patreon channel where people can support us if they choose to, and you will have access to hundreds of videos and articles that I have written about how to grow a garden. I'm a soil laboratory to help you grow your very best garden. Send me your soil samples, and I will tell you about the living microbes in your soil that will mineralize to make plant food for you. I have a 17-week boot camp, and right now we have room for 1 more male student. The reason I say male is because we have housing for females and for males. So we have that almost full. Spring boot camp is coming up, and it's just a couple of weeks away, and we have room for a few more people in that. It's basically full, but if you want to come to spring boot camp, and we will teach you the basics of soil health and how to grow a garden in a way that will give you the very best food of your entire life. I can do consulting for you if you're starting a farm. My book is being reviewed by people, and I have a fun review to share with you tonight that we recently got. My newsletter is available. If you want to get my newsletter, go to my website, www.georgicrevolution.com. Okay, here is the book review that I got back. I got this from Kristen Hartvig. She is she's a doctor in UK, which is pretty awesome. I sent this to her because I am a fan of her work. I love her books, and I think it's brilliant the way she has written them, and she is all about health and nutrition. So here we are. I'm going to read this. Dear William, herewith my thoughts about your book. This is a good book written by a good man. It is also an excellent growing guide, a manual for human partnership with the land, not only to grow food, but even more importantly, to reconnect with the earth, all its inhabitants, and the rest of the universe. It brings to life Albert Einstein's words, look deep into nature, and you will understand everything better. I am not familiar with the Georgic tradition, and as a vegan, I don't believe in eating animals, but I do agree that animals play an important role in any ecosystem. By reading this book, I have broadened my perspective and seen the deep respect William DeMille has for all life. He inspires every reader and student to put what they learn from books into practice, wherever they are. I too believe the unseen matters as much as the seen, and that the soil is sacred. And I particularly like the notion that the voice of God is a perfect note, endowing the listener with pure knowledge. Thank you for sharing your deep knowledge and for inspiring present and future gardeners to look within and combine scientific learning with a return to the old traditions. Kristen Hartvig, The Healing Garden, Sussex, UK. So thank you, Kristen. This is pretty awesome. And we have put this in the book. And the book will be going out on the 22nd of April. That is our release date. But for those of you who are on here, it's actually on it's on Amazon right now. You can go order it. But yeah, if I get some more, you might want to wait, because if I do get some more of these thoughts from people about my book, then they will be printed with the book. I will add those between now and the 22nd. But some of my students who are coming to my class this year, they've already ordered it so they could start reading it, so that they could see what the heck they're going to be getting themselves into, which is pretty great. So I'm going to talk a little bit tonight about a few things, but before we get into that, I just want to point out that Spring Boot Camp is April 27, 28, 29. It is here at my garden with me in person in Clover Valley, Nevada, which is just south of I-80. So it's about a 3-hour drive from the Wasatch Front area of northern Utah. And we live in a very harsh climate. We have an 80-day growing season, which is very short. We live at 5,800 feet elevation, which is hard to grow plants. And I love living here because it gives us a challenge on how to have gardens where gardens probably normally do not grow. If you want to take the 17-week course, get a hold of me ASAP so that you can get in. And again, all of my information is at www.georgicrevolution.com. So here we are today, and I want to talk about using gardening as a tool to strengthen your family relationships. This is one of the most important reasons that we garden, is because the relationships we can build, the people that we can become. We want to be able to have we want to be able to get people to, go out into nature, to spend time in nature. There's been a lot of research done in the last 50 years that has shown how important it is that people are in nature and they have a relationship with the earth, and they are getting dirty. Small boys need to dig holes and climb trees and run through fields and just get wild. They have those wild instincts. Young girls need to pick flowers and go fishing and swim in ponds. And it's a fascinating, awesome thing when you see communities who are in nature and they are educating themselves according to ecology. So that's a pretty great thing. There's a lot of doctors out there who actually prescribe for mental health reasons that people are outside, and they go outside and they interact with whatever they encounter, bugs on the ground, grass that they're walking on, trees that are overhead, the shade trees, sitting on a park bench under a shade tree can be very good for our mental health. My argument to this whole thing is that the more time we spend outside, the healthier we are. So I love this. It's pretty awesome and it's pretty great. I like to take it a step further to the fact that not only is it good for the individual to be out there in nature, but it's also very healthy for the relationships within our families and our friendships to be in nature. There's a lot of times that when we're out there in life and we're working on things together, especially this is true with parents and children, but it could be with any relationships. But when we're working with people and we're trying to accomplish a goal like raising kids, we can find that some of the people we're working with may have problems and issues. Well, being in nature is something that is awesome to be able to help with that, because there are a lot of the modern problems that people have. We hear of a lot of OCD and mood disorders and ADHD, and there's just all these things that people deal with nowadays. And the more we calm down, the more we are in nature, the more we stop stimulating ourselves and entertaining ourselves to death, and we let the ecology, the stimulus of whatever we're around, our environment, when that comes into us, it is affecting us. So by removing ourselves from a lot of the man-made things that are super overstimulating to certain personalities, it can really help with a lot of those issues. So I think it's a really important, and it's awesome to be able to go into any type of a natural setting, whether you're hiking or gardening or camping, and you just allow the stimulation from the environment you're in to act upon you. And it's really interesting because when you take people who've been stuck in the house for years and they don't really interact with Mother Nature very much, they have a very different mindset when they go into nature. A lot of people are scared, they're worried, they're anxious, they have anxiety. I mean, this is our natural setting, really. I mean, it's nice to have a house so you can get out of the wind. But when you look at humans as a species, being outside is a very normal thing. And to modern people, sometimes we don't see it that way, which is a tragedy. And I think we are paying for it in our mental health a lot of times. But it really helps us to find the genius of the children that we're working in when we can have a gardening activity, because there are so many of the sciences that we can use in gardening. We can study literature, we can study mathematics and biology, animal science, plant science, microbiology. There's all, and that's just the beginning. We could list 50 things that we could study and learn with our kids and our friends, which would be pretty awesome if more people were doing that. And there's a lot of people who are doing that, which I absolutely love. And so that's pretty awesome. I super love being outside and working with people outside. I've got 4 people signed up for my 17-week class this year. And the way that works is we are outside for about 5 to 8 hours a day. And so that is pretty wonderful, because we are able to, interact with all sorts of things. We get pretty dirty, every day we come in, we wash our hands. By the end of the week, we can't wash our hands anymore because they are stained from pretty great things like compost extract and other things. So it's pretty cool. So we get a lot of beneficial microbes. People go home healthier than they came when they come to the 17-week class that we do. So these young people are in for a treat this summer. I've been talking to them a little bit over the last couple of weeks, and they are pretty stoked and excited. So if you have questions, let's go ahead and you can unmute and ask your gardening questions, your questions about the Georgic tradition, questions about soil health, questions about education, gardening, livestock, any of those things. And let's have a fun discussion. And the purpose of this is so that you can grow the most nutritious food possible. So you can unmute or you can type into the chat, whichever one you want, and we will discuss what you want. And when we have a 40-minute silence, that is when this meeting ends. So do not be shy.
You there, William? Can you hear us?
I can hear you, Lee. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Good to see you. So I had a question where I was talking to Cade over at his place, and he's got his little garden. Last year I talked him into putting a bunch of detritus on it, so wood chips and straw material, and then he fed a couple of lambs on it over the winter, so they're pooping on it and stuff. And then I suggested maybe we should put his chickens on it for a little while before he gets ready to plant, and he said, oh, it sounds fine. But then I was like kind of backpedaling a little bit. How do I know if I've got too much manure type material mixed in with the straw and wood chips?
Okay, so how long were you said he had lambs, like sheep on there?
Yeah, sheep. Yep.
Okay, how long were they there?
I don't have exact dates, but I think it was like 2 months.
Yeah, okay. You may not want to put the chickens on there. You're making a good, it's a great question, because you can get too much fresh manure on there, which has too much nitrogen in it. And so your plants aren't going to do super good right off. So maybe hold off on the chickens and just go with what you've already done. But that sounds really great. The way you've introduced the diversity is going to be fantastic for that. And the wood chips and the straw and stuff, perfect food for the beneficial fungus to do your mineralization. So this is great.
Okay, so what kind of thought process do you go through? Is it just experience as far as deciding how much time to have animals on it or anything? Or, different animals that have different amounts of nitrogen, I would assume. I guess I don't. What factors do you consider?
Okay, so what the animals are eating has a big part to do with it. If they're eating the worst horrible hay that you can find and they're about to starve to death, you probably don't have a lot of high nitrogen. But if you're feeding a super high quality dairy quality alfalfa hay, then that's probably about the highest nitrogen you can get. If the animals are eating a lot of grain, like the chickens or any poultry, chickens, turkeys, whatever, grains are super high nitrogen. So it's not so much the animal, it's the amount of feed that you're putting on there and the quality of the feed. That's the thing that I think about all the time.
Okay. So then, is there like any way to put numbers to it or anything? So if I said, okay, I am feeding grain and I've got 14 birds. I read an article about it, but they didn't comment anything about the detritus or the chips or anything, right? So their article is saying like, I wish I had it in front of me, but it was like 0.03 pounds of nitrogen total, per square foot, I guess would be like what they're suggesting you want to put down total for the year. And then the article was talking about how many days per chicken kind of thing would get you to that amount.
Okay. Yeah, so I don't have any kind of a formula like that I use at all.
Okay.
And I think anybody who tries to get that scientific with it, you're probably not going to be happy with it, because I think every single spring it's going to be different because there's so many factors. It depends on how much fungus and bacteria is in your soil. It depends on your detritus sphere that's there. It depends on the plants that we're growing. It depends on your weather. Did you have a mild winter when the ground wasn't frozen? That would mean that your microbial activity in the soil was a lot more active than if the ground was frozen. Then it would have been less active. And that's just the beginning of variables. There could be 50 variables. So when we start putting numbers on things, that's when I take a step back and think, okay, this isn't fun anymore.
Okay. So, yeah. So, well, then I guess that leads to the next question. Would there be some sort of test you would do to determine if you have too much or too little, or do you just need to wait and see how the plants react?
The easy thing is to just plant things and see how they react. If they're not doing well and like it looks like they're getting nitrogen burned around the edges of the leaves, then irrigate it a lot. Soak it with tons of water and try to leach some of that out of there. So that's one thing you could do. The other thing to do is you could plant a crop that loves the nitrogen a lot more. So
okay.
And then next year, don't put as many livestock on it. Don't leave them on there for as long.
Right. I guess this is separate, but it's similar. But you do the microscope testing, right, to see what beneficials are active and stuff, how active and how many and everything. But Cade was telling me about the like NPK test that they got from some university. Do you have some like a similar that would be like comparable that you use, or are they pretty not comparable?
So I only do the living organism test. I don't worry about what is available for the plant. The NPK test, that technology was developed in the 1940s, and they're the same tests we use today. And we have learned a lot since the 1940s. It won't be very long, and that'll be 100 years ago. So the thing is, that can work, and it helps you to a point. But where it doesn't help you, and the reason I don't use it anymore, and the reason I consider it obsolete, is because the test tells you what it was when you pulled the soil sample. And most people will pull soil samples in the springtime, a month before they plant their garden. Well, and then 2 months later, so their garden's a month old, those nutrients have changed. Because if you pull another soil, because there's been people who've done this over and over hundreds of times, and they will pull a soil sample every month of the year, and you have huge changes on what's available. And so I consider it obsolete. What doesn't change are the living microorganisms in the soil. Now, their populations change, and how much plant food they're creating changes with the temperature of the soil. But if you know that you have equal amounts of fungus and bacteria, then you know that you're going to be growing most of the food crops that we grow. And what we find when we do soil tests is that usually we have hardly any recognizable or detectable fungus, and it's mostly bacteria. And that means you're going to have huge weed problems, and you're going to be having lots of rapid growth of all those annual type plants. So it would be pretty good for broccoli and cauliflower and cabbage and kale, Brussels sprouts. If that's what you're growing, those plants would do pretty good. But that's about it. All the other food crops, they need quite a bit of fungus in the soil because that beneficial fungus will make it so that those plants are getting the nutrients that they need. So, I mean, this is kind of a new science it's not really new. We've known about this for 20 years, but nobody's talking about it because it's not easy. And people just want to go to Home Depot and buy fertilizer and throw it on the garden because we live in a world of ease, but now we have a world of malnutrition. So we have abundant food that's not as nutritious as it could be, and we know that because we've done all the nutrition tests on the plants. So the scientific world, it's filled with all these publications. So yeah, it may be it's different. I don't think it's harder to do it this way. It's certainly cheaper because you can get to a point where you don't buy anything for your garden, nothing. But now people, if they're serious about growing food, they might spend, $1,500 a year on their garden, just for a garden, which is amazingly expensive to me. So.
Right. So going back, you can do your organism test, and you're talking about that. Well, so we put the wood chips on Kate's garden at like November, and then put the sheep on it soon after. So I don't really think with the temperatures since November that very much has grown. I couldn't imagine. So doing a test right now, I think would be premature. Do you agree?
How thick are your wood chips?
Well, it ended up kind of lopsided, so it's probably like 3 inches thick on the high side and 6 or 8 inches thick on the low side.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, you could pull a soil sample and send it to me. Where he lives, his planting time's probably around the 1st of June. Because he's pretty unless he's in a greenhouse.
Right. So they do have a small greenhouse, but we didn't really do any work with that soil yet. But yeah, I would guess end of May, 1st of June, for most things. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, you could pull a sample. A good thing to do is just have a thermometer that you can stick in the soil, like a compost thermometer that'll read the soil temperatures. And when that soil temperature's, above 55 degrees, perfect time to pull a sample.
Okay. But if we don't, like I said, I don't imagine that very much has grown yet. The test will, I guess, confirm that. But I would imagine throughout the summer, there would be a lot more to look at, right? Or
not necessarily. Some of the tests that we've been doing, not me, but the scientific community has been doing over the years, they have found that some of the most active microbial activity is within that space between the snow and the soil surface in the middle of the winter. Really? And those are organisms that live at those temperatures, and they actually are very beneficial to getting that soil ready. You know what? As soon as you get warm days and that grass just takes off and grows like crazy, a lot of that is because of the microbial activity that has gone on during the winter time. So, once the soil gets warmer, you're going to have the higher populations of the microbes that live at those warmer temperatures throughout the growing season. But we can still tell, even with a little earlier test, what your fungus and bacterial ratios are. We can get a good idea,
And that's the main outcome of your test, is that?
It's the most important practical thing. Yeah.
Okay.
We're gonna do a bacterial count and a fungal count and a beneficial nematode count. We're gonna look for bad nematodes. We're gonna be looking for anything that is a disease-causing organism, and we'll be looking for microarthropods and for your protozoa count. And each of those organisms do different things. And so by knowing how many are in there in a particular sample, then we will know what plant food will be available for your plants.
Okay. Cool.
See, here's the magic of it. And this is the part that people don't understand. And so I'm going to tell you right now, because this is fascinating. Because people say, well, just go buy the fertilizer. My garden, I'm only going to need to buy $20 worth of fertilizer, and that'll last me for 3 years with my garden. So it's nothing. Well, okay, so the magic of not using the fertilizer is that the plant will tell the microbes what to do, because the plant will put what we call exudates, which are sugars and proteins. So it will exudate those out of the roots into the soil, but it'll put it out in different combinations, and it will grow different species of microbes. And then that will, and so the plant knows which nutrient it needs. So if it has a boron deficiency, it will put out a specific combination of sugars and proteins, so that the microbes will grow that are the species of microbes that will mineralize boron. And then those mineralizing fungus and bacteria will put the boron right inside the plant root. Plant doesn't even suck it up, man. Those little guys have shovels and they're like dumping it in. So it's magical and awesome to see this, which means that the whole idea of adjusting your pH for your garden, that's ancient technology too. That's obsolete. Boy, the people selling sulfur and lime and gypsum, that makes them mad when I teach that, because you're going to have to find a new way to make a living. I'm not trying to put anybody out of business. It's just that when things become scientifically obsolete, let's move on with the world that we live in. And the results for just the normal person is that our Twinkies and Ding Dongs in the junk food store, they're actually getting healthier as farmers are farming this way, because the ingredients going into all that junk food is a higher quality food. So I say that, I'm totally joking about the Twinkies and Ding Dongs, because I don't know that they'll ever be healthy. But the food that we get from farms who are doing it this way is honestly healthier food. It really is.
Good. I don't want to hog the whole conversation, but I could talk to you all night probably. You asked about how thick the wood chips were, and I didn't really get your feedback on your thoughts on that.
Oh, well, I was just wondering if it was thick enough that it was insulating the ground so the ground didn't freeze underneath. That's why I had asked that. And so in my mind, I answered it. Well, if it's 3 to 6 inches thick, it's probably not thick enough. You'd probably have to be 12 to 14 inches.
And is that something you would try to do, or is that too much labor? Like, because you got to get through it to plant the seeds, right?
No.
No, you can put this.
No, when you're planting, if you have only big, thick wood chips that are brand new that have not decomposed, then you probably need to be mixing other detritus with the wood chips, like ground up leaves, old rotten hay. But anytime you're using hay, you got to pre-sprout the weed seeds or they'll sprout and you'll have a giant weed patch. So be careful with that. But a little bit of barnyard manure so that the seed thinks that it is in some soil so it can germinate. So I just take a sharp stick and poke straight down in that stuff until I get to where it looks kind of like soil. So a couple inches deep, you pop your seeds in and they'll come right up. But if I do have a detritus that's mostly fresh new wood chips, I just put transplants in, put them in a big pot, like a 3-inch little pot. You just move your wood chips back, set that down in there, and then put the wood chips back around it. But by the second year, that will be decomposed down enough usually that you can plant the seeds directly in it. Okay. So that's how I would handle that.
Yeah. But I guess so in that answer is you're saying if you went 12 to 14 inches thick and it was a good mixture, that would be all right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And the way is if your seed is getting good contact with soil or whatever. I mean, maybe not the soil all the way down under your 14-inch stuff, but if it's only a half an inch under a couple of wood chips, it's never going to hold enough moisture to sprout. So you have to have some small fine material of that detritus so that it can stay wet long enough to sprout. So
so you just described putting pots into wood chips.
Yeah.
Plastic pots or biodegradable pots or.
Well, you don't put the pot in. It's just a transplant. You pull the transplant out just like any normal garden. So if it's a biodegradable pot, that's fine. But you would pull it if it's a plastic pot. Pull it out, stick it in there.
Right. Yeah. Okay. All right. Not a good question, but hey. Okay. And so with ours, we had a really good snowfall this weekend, and so our yard is 2 feet deep in snow or whatever it is. Now it's melting pretty quick though. But our garden is still so wet that I don't know. It's going to take a while. We can't even walk in it so much.
Yeah, well, let her dry out. You're talking about northern Utah, right?
Yep. Well, wherever we live.
Yep. Well, you live in Utah and Missouri. I never know where you are.
Yeah, we're talking about Utah.
Yeah. So yeah, you got plenty of time to garden there where you're at. You have a long growing season, so don't get in a hurry. If you get stuff out the first week of May, you're going to have a fantastic garden.
Well, Melanie's been planting the seeds and putting them in under lights, and so we'll see what grows there.
I'm also doing winter sowing in gallon tubs, and those will germinate when they're ready.
Yeah,
so
it sounds good.
I did plant squash seeds thinking, you go to the garden center and you see these squash leaves that are this big in a nice little 3-inch pot. And I planted some the other day, and now the tendrils are just like this with a little leaf on the
Yeah, that's what the garden center wants. They want you to buy them early and then they all freeze to death. And then you come buy them again. Because the purpose of a garden center is to sell plants. It's not to help gardeners. I'm sorry that that's negative, but that is the reality. And I'm sorry, but that's just the way it is.
I figure if they're that big in May, the end of May, then I better get going with mine, and so they'll be nice and big too when it's the end of May, the ones that I planted and put under light. So we'll see. The tendrils are really long though. You talked about that. It's because the lights are not close enough to the sprout, or what causes these long tendrils on anything that we plant in a seed starting?
It's just they don't have enough light. That's growing a warm season plant before the warm season's here.
Yeah.
So, you know, things like cucumbers and squashes, pumpkins, melons. In northern Utah, it's a great thing to just plant the seeds out there the first week of May.
Okay. Well, you know, our last frost date is May 15th, where we are in Santa Fe. So I was surprised at that one. I thought, golly, we can plant earlier than that in Missouri. But I don't know. I think we're really a 5B. We're higher up elevation. We're not down in the valley like everybody else.
Yeah.
So
that makes a difference.
Yeah. And so I guess those were melons, not squash. I knew better for squash, but I figured, let's just plant some. We'll see how they do.
Okay, thank you for being on. It was fun. We will be here next week, same time. And boot camp's coming up, so that's going to be super fun. So hopefully this tonight helped you to have the best garden of your entire life. And you can get on here live on Thursday nights at 7 o'clock Pacific time. And then these recordings go out on YouTube. And I think I'm going to start putting them up as a podcast also, because YouTube invented a podcast platform. So we will try that and see if we can help people. So thank you, and we will see you later.
Thanks, William.
You're welcome.